Welcome to the Self-Growth Nerds podcast. I'm your host, Marie, a courage coach, creative soul, and adventure seeker. Since through hiking the Pacific Crest Trail in 2019, I'm on a mission to help you embrace your most confident self so you can achieve your dreams too. If you're eager for deep conversations, big questions, and meaningful connections, join me on the quest to discovering how we can create a more magical and memorable life. Hello, nerds! How are you? I'm good. Last weekend, my 10-year-old goddaughter came to spend time with me, and we watched a lot of SpongeBob SquarePants. Yes. We paid to do a maze as well, which is like a touristy trap. Not trap, that's mean. But it was pretty expensive, and the goal was to do it the fastest that you can. But I was like, no, let's mess it up. We paid, so might as well, get it wrong a few times before we get it right. I don't want to be out in 15 minutes. So that was fun. Then we went to get ice cream, to see my nephews. We ate sushi, which she was really happy about. We went to the cinema. And then the next day was even better. Thing is, she doesn't like to take decisions, and Ollie had a great idea. Ollie's my partner, for those of you who are new to the podcast. He said, write down a bunch of activities on a sheet and then give it to her and ask her to rate them on a scale of 1 to 10. So that's what we did, and it worked really well. I said to her, just rate them on how fun they seem. And she rated hiking 10 out of 10. So we went on a hike and threw a lot of rocks in the water. There's nothing more fun than throwing big rocks and making big splashes. And then we went thrift shopping, which was like the highlight of the weekend because she's one of 4 kids and she gets the clothes from her older sisters. So she doesn't have new clothes ever, or not very often. So it felt very glamorous. And finally, we played some Nintendo before I drove her back to her parents. And next weekend, we're going in a cottage in the woods with no service. So that's also gonna be really great. I'm excited to disconnect and spend some time with friends and babies. Babies are everywhere in my life nowadays. So, enough of my telling you about my plans. Let's get into today's topic. I want to talk about how to listen to your inner voice. My sister, she hates it when I say to her, just listen to your heart. What's your heart telling you? She gets annoyed. For those of you who know the Enneagram, she's an Enneagram 1 and I'm a 4. So I'm much more emotional and spiritual while she's more rational and down to earth. So this episode is for people like her or anyone who has a hard time listening to their inner voice. I'm going to describe what I mean and give you tricks as to how to identify what your heart is telling you. So first, let's talk about what it is. So your inner voice is not your brain's constant stream of consciousness. It's also not your self-talk that's the result of conditioning. It's much more quiet, like a whisper or a pull. Sometimes it's not necessarily words, but sensations that feel grounded. For me, it was often a one-word whisper. Go. Go. Leave this relationship. Go. Cross the ocean. Go. Just go. Hike the PCT. Go. Leave that job in which you feel trapped. Go. Take that course. Take that leap. Even though all the odds seem to be against you. Even though it doesn't make logical sense. It's a good partner. It's a good job. I should be responsible. I should be reasonable. I should be safe. But maybe not. Cheryl Strayed really helped me identify my inner voice when I read her book, Tiny Beautiful Things. And I'm going to read the sentences I underlined in a story in which she talks about her ex-husband and wanting to leave him. She writes, "I had to leave because I wanted to, just like all of you do, even if you are not ready to do it yet. When it comes down to it, you must trust your truest truth, even though there are other truths running alongside it, such as your love for the partners you want to leave." He deserved the love of a woman who didn't have the word go whispering like a deranged ghost in her ear. I didn't want to stay with my ex-husband, not at my core, even though whole swaths of me did. And if there's one thing I believe more than I believe anything else, is that you can't fake the core. The truth that lives there will eventually win out. It's a God we must obey, a force that brings us all inevitably to our knees. And because of it, I can only ask the three of you the same question. Will you do it later or will you do it now? Yours, Sugar. This makes me feel emotional. Like I know those words like a prayer because they had such an impact on me in the past. All right, deep breath. Let's go back to it. We have learned to push that little voice down because its desires often didn't match with what the world expected from us. If you had this big creative urge as a child, did your parents encourage you? Did they limit you because they didn't have the bandwidth, the resources, or didn't want you to get dirty or whatever? When I lived in London, I worked for a creative agency for a while, and we went to do an art workshop for children at Buckingham Palace. That was actually really amazing. In a really fancy room with like big carpets hanging on the walls with pictures on them. And there was big sheets of paper on the floor where children could draw, and two twins came in. They were exactly the same, identical twins with the same clothes. And then they all started drawing, except one of them was like making little drawings in a calm, peaceful manner. And the other one was doing this thing where he had like a pen in his fist, and he would just spin on himself and draw like a super thick circle around him. Everyone has like a different creative self, and we're not all lucky enough to be born in a family where there is space for that. I was lucky that my parents allowed me to write on the walls of my bedroom. So when friends would come over, we wanted to like write poems or letter to each other. My parents didn't mind that I had a wall for this. And when they moved from the house where I grew up to the house where they live now, my dad cut pieces of that wall with my friend's handwriting. And he basically copy-pasted it on the wall of the bedroom I have in their house now. It's amazing. But a friend of mine, to give you a counterexample, said that her mom thought her art when she was little took too much space in their home, and she got annoyed with that. She told her, like, don't take so much space. And that has impact in your life as an adult. And I've told you this theater story before, but I'm going to tell you again. When I was like 12 or 13 years old, I did theater after school, and there was songs in the play we were doing. I didn't have a singing role, but my friend Laurence did. And one day she was not there for practice, so I raised my hand to ask if I could take her spot just for that moment. And the teacher laughed so hard, and he said, You can't sing for shit in front of everyone. And I remember feeling like I wished the ground would open and swallow me in. This also has impact. And when I wanted to play hockey and my parents said no because they didn't want to be in an arena every weekend, I understand them, and I would probably do the same if my kids wanted to play hockey. But the point of that is to say, it's not to like shame caregivers or people in your past, not at all. The point is to say that you've had impulses all your life that you just followed as a child, but the more they got squashed, the better you learned to squash them by yourself as an adult. And when I say squashed, I mean by your parents, your caregivers, your family, your teachers, society at large. And it might not have been intentional at all. Sometimes it might simply have been because the resources weren't there, or it might have been just like a moment where someone didn't think about what they said. But now we have the power to relearn how to listen to those impulses. And that's amazing. Those impulses are just another word to describe the inner voice. And that's a word that I know Abraham Hicks uses. And Glennon Doyle calls it the inner knowing. Everyone has a different way to talk about this. That's what I call the core of you underneath all the protective layers. You have the power to reconnect with that core. And speaking of core, I'm a courage coach, right? And Mark Nepo, the author, made me realize that the definition of courage fits perfectly with what I do. Courage means to stand by your core, to act from there. Now I'm going to give you tips to do it. Number 1, you got to create good conditions by quieting your mind or your brain chatter as much as possible. There's different ways to do that. There's meditation, of course, but it doesn't have to be meditation. It can also be baking, running, hiking, listening to a podcast, reading a book. There's also a moment in the morning. There's like 15 seconds in the morning before all of your thoughts rush in, where there's like a clearer canal to your core. So when you're in that moment, or when you've managed to quiet your brain a little bit, step 2 is to ask good questions. With or without your journal. Writing definitely helps me. I tell you about writing in my journal all the time, but you don't have to if you don't want to. Ask questions like, what do I need right now? What have I been craving that I haven't given myself? What is my core trying to tell me? What do I most desire? What's the desire underneath the surface, underneath the thought, underneath the frustration? What do I want? And step 3 is to be patient. Your inner voice might not trust that you will listen. It might be scared to speak up because it's been used to you pushing it back down, to you saying, no, that doesn't make sense. What a stupid idea. Like when we learn to do brainstorming at school, we learn that every idea is a good idea and we have to be open-minded, but we don't do that with ourselves. We like jump to conclusions real fast. No, bad idea. So be patient. Let your inner voice rise to the surface, slowly but surely. You might not have answers at all sometimes, and that's okay. Step 4 is being willing to hear, to receive its desires with open hearts. Rest in the knowing that you don't need to take action right away. Just knowing what you want, what your innermost core want, is a gift you give yourself. What it will tell you might feel too big or just plain impossible. It might even involve leaving people behind or making changes that seem unrealistic or scary. But allow yourself to just know and imagine without having to do something about it, without focusing on the how you will get there. The how, if you decide to go in that direction, will figure itself out along the way. The first step is to start believing that it's possible for you, little by little. Without you even noticing, you'll start the internal grieving process for who you are now. Your heart will prepare you for the person that you most want to become. Learning to listen to your inner voice is so important because if you don't, who do you listen to? There are two options here. You either listen to other people or to your fears. Or I guess there's also a bonus option. You can listen to your bank account balance. But let's focus on the first two. And if you want to learn about money mindset, listen to the episode I made on that subject. All right. Number one, if you listen to other people who seem to know better, we tend to ask our friends, colleagues, doctors, books, podcasts, whatever, what do you think I should do? The problem with outsourcing advice is that we remain in the realm of the shoulds, based on someone else's data and someone else's experience. And I'm not saying we shouldn't take advice from others, not at all. I'm saying don't be too quick to take their truth for your truth, especially if it doesn't feel right. Even when my clients ask me what I think they should do about a certain situation, I do this very annoying thing when I turn the question back to them and I ask, what do you want to do? My client the other day was telling me, I should keep in touch with that friend. And there was another one telling me I should move back to where my family lives. And when I hear sentences like this, it's always a sign for me that they're not doing what they want to do. So again, I ask them, wait, what do you want to do? If you didn't care about others, what would you want to do? And I'm not advocating that you stop caring about what everyone else thinks and feels and take selfish decisions all the time. I don't want you to deceive yourself, that's all. I want you to be truthful and empowered. There is nothing you should do. You get to decide every time. You get to decide, for example, I am going to keep in touch with that friend, even though it requires effort from me, because it's important to me. Or you get to decide, I am not going to move to where my family lives, even though I know they miss me, because that is just not what I want. Or I am going to move to my partner's state or country, not because I want to, but because it's important to them and I love them and I'm willing to try. Or, and that's the last example, I am not going to babysit my friend's child, even though they asked me, because I just don't want to right now. Not wanting to is good enough of a reason. There is no manual of instruction, like Brooke Castillo says, of what you should or shouldn't do as a quote-unquote good friend, good daughter, good son, or good friend. I said that twice. There's no manual of instructions. Most often when I ask clients or friends what they want, they go straight to, I don't really know. But what I find is that you know most of the time what you want to do. It's just scary as hell and hard to take ownership of. The other day, I brought a problem I was having with a friend of mine to my coach. I made it all complicated and I said, I'm not sure what I should do, and she said, if you were to take a guess, what would be the best thing to do? And I knew that the best thing to do was to have a tough conversation. I just didn't want to talk about it because it was so uncomfortable. It made me want to puke with fear. Which leads me to my next point. If you're not listening to your inner voice and you're not listening to other people, chances are you're listening to your fears. Listen to last week's episode if you haven't already on the subject of fear. You make decisions based on what happened to you in the past or what you've seen happen to people around you. You make decisions based on what could happen. You consider the worst case scenario a lot more than you do the best case scenario, which is unfortunate, but totally normal. For example, people who say, I'm not going to start a restaurant because 4 out of 5 fail, or I'm not going to write a book because there's already too many books out there, or I'm not going to go hiking because my cardio's always been bad, or I'm not going to become a coach because people won't take me seriously. They're all things that could potentially happen, but are they good enough of a reason not to do something that you really want to do? Maybe. In the past, I wanted to be a theater performer, and I decided not to go that route because I wanted to be able to make a comfortable living, to earn good money. And And I was honest with myself about that. I didn't say I can't do it, I choose not to do it. Even though I know that some people manage to make a great living out of being a performer, I decided that that's not a risk I wanted to take, and that's fine. But you have to make sure you love your reason for not doing something that matters to you. Okay? Don't ask yourself, how can I lead my life in a way that's going to be most comfortable for all parties involved? That's not how it works. Like I was saying last week, Joseph Campbell, in his work in the hero's journey, he says the hero will try all of the easiest path before they realize they need to take the path least traveled. So save yourself some time. And what happens when you listen to other people or to your fears or to your bank account is what? Well, a feeling of disconnection and disempowerment. A pushing down of your deepest desires that can very well lead to burnout or to depression. Now imagine though on the other side what becomes possible when you do listen and find the courage to follow what your inner voice wants you to do. Yes, it's super freaky, but it's also so liberating. Makes you feel so content with your life, like you're in pure alignment. And suddenly what happens is that the outside world doesn't affect you as much because you have aligned all the forces within you and you know you are exactly where you're meant to be, being who you are and doing what you want to be doing. Okay, so let me ask you this. What would you do if you trusted your inner voice so completely that you didn't need any validation other than your own? Would you take a bet on that project you've been hesitating about and planning in great details for too long? Like maybe it's a big hike or a podcast or an amazing quirky dinner party side business like one of my clients. Would you own your big ambitions and become the visionary changemaker that you know you can be? Seek to have an impact on climate change or better adapted health services for immigrants like another one of my clients? Would you make a transition towards the alternative lifestyle that's been calling your heart? Like move to the countryside and adopt all of the animals and have some goats, or creating a kind-hearted communal village? It's up to you. There's so many possibilities, but one thing's for sure, money, fears, and other people's opinions wouldn't determine your decisions because you'd be the one and only leader of your own life. If this speaks to you and you haven't applied for your spot in Brave and Bold yet, do it now at selfgrowthnerds.com/brave and bold. It only takes a few minutes, and once you apply, you'll receive your invitation to the free live private training I'm hosting on October 28th. There's going to be a replay where you will learn my 3-part framework for creating a daily life that's as fulfilling as your adventures, why you still get stuck in your old patterns when you know you have so much potential, and a tangible step-by-step method to start reconnecting with your core and start acting from there now. This is stuff I've never taught before and it's going to be high quality, so make sure that you're there. Application closes on Wednesday at midnight Eastern time. So I don't know when you're listening to this, but application close on the 27th at midnight. So make sure you fill one in. Only takes a few minutes. And if you're not sure you want to be in a coaching program, that's fine. I would still recommend that you apply, that you come to the private training. It will teach you so much. All right. Have a beautiful week. Listen to your inner voice as much as you can. And I will talk to you soon. Bye-bye. You just listened to the Self-Growth Nerds podcast. Make sure to subscribe and to find me on Instagram at Self-Growth Nerds. If you want individual help developing the confidence to create a more meaningful and exciting life, visit selfgrowthnerds.com today to learn how. Finally, I want to thank my friend Etienne Galano for editing this, and I want to thank you, kind-hearted souls, for growing into your truest, most courageous selves every day and making this world a better, more beautiful place. My name is Marie, and I will talk to you next week.